Among the numerous situations in which you might find yourself throughout history, being in the pilot seat of a Mitsubishi A6M0 plane in 1945 Japan is undoubtedly one of the least enviable. You'd be expected to die, obviously, while trying your best to crash into an enemy vessel that would be trying its absolute best to take you down. Truth be told, being a kamikaze pilot was a cruel fate, and it was one of those cases where there were no winners involved. But how did the Japanese get to the point of employing such extreme tactics? And what was it like to be a kamikaze pilot? Well, if there's one thing that's consistent about the Japanese across their long and storied history, it's that they take everything very seriously, especially war. Lest we forget, Japanese feudalism only ended in 1871. Up until then, Japanese society was dominated by its warrior class, the samurai, who wielded immense power and sometimes acted more like independent warlords than sworn vassals. Their nebulous and always evolving moral code, Bushido, placed the utmost importance on courage and self-sacrifice, and while the samurai eventually went the way of the dodo, their spirit remained. When the last Japanese feudal government was overthrown and the emperor regained his full autocratic glory, his first task was to modernize Japan so that it could rival the industrialized empires of the West. To that end, he invited foreign military advisors, notably the French, to help reorganize the feudal samurai remnants into a proper standing army. By that point, the samurai were a badly outdated fighting force, yet their discipline was a valuable asset. So, to harness it, Japan undertook a massive cultural re-education campaign. The Bushido Code of Old was rewritten to promote loyalty to the emperor above all else, and it was taught not just to soldiers, but to all Japanese, both in school and across all media. Japanese religion was co-opted as well. Using the same technique, the emperor organized the previously loose folklore traditions of Shintoism into a government-run apparatus that exalted the emperor's divine nature. With an almost fanatical loyalty to their emperor, the new Japanese military became among the fiercest in Asia, and before long it was put to use against rivals, first in taking Korea and Taiwan from the Chinese, and then in conquering the southern half of Sakhalin Island and absolutely humiliating the Russians. The Japanese continued their string of victories, but like all successful militaristic empires, they eventually got too cocky and decided to take on the United States. It's a classic mistake. We've all been there. Now, credit where credit is due, the Japanese put up a good fight in the air, especially during the early stages of the war. Their planes were of a good quality, and their pilots were well trained, averaging an impressive 12-to-1 kill ratio in early 1942. But America's insurmountable industrial advantage eventually tilted the scales, and by 1944, Japanese resource shortages and continued American radar innovations had made traditional air attacks impractical. What isn't impractical, though, is the intricate combat simulation by our dear friends over at War Thunder. By far the most comprehensive vehicle combat game ever made. Featuring an impressive lineup of over 2,000 planes, tanks, ships, and helicopters, War Thunder lets you experience more than a century of warfare in unparalleled detail. Yes, and in War Thunder, each vehicle is modeled in its entirety, all the way down to its individual parts and components, offering a unique combat experience without abstractions like arbitrary hit points. You can compete for free in dynamic, combined arms battles against other players on all major platforms like PC, Xbox, and PlayStation. And as a special courtesy to SideQuest viewers, War Thunder are offering new players a 7-day premium account, complete with multiple premium vehicles, freshly minted in-game currency, and the Eagle of Valor decoration, if you go to the link in the description. Visit playwt.link/sidequest to play War Thunder and dominate your enemies. But where were we? Ah yes, the summer of 1944. The Japanese leadership came together to figure out how to dominate their enemies. They did the maths, and it turned out that it would be more efficient for them to use their now outdated aircraft as suicide bombs. In a very poetically Japanese fashion, they called this new strategy kamikaze, or divine wind, evoking the furious typhoons that saved Japan from the Mongol invasions of Kublai Khan. The first kamikaze mission was organized in October 1944 in the Philippines, towards which the US Navy was rapidly sailing. 24 student pilots were chosen for the grim task. All volunteered eagerly by raising both hands. The leader of this new unit was the 23-year-old Yukio Seki, the most promising student. And here he is, on the far left, drinking a ceremonial toast of water as a farewell. The Americans arrived near the island of Leyte on the 23rd of October, initiating what would turn into the largest naval battle in history. However, due to heavy cloud cover, the first kamikaze mission could only fly 2 days later. On the morning of the 25th of October, Yukio and his 4 fellow pilots took off, each carrying a 550-pound bomb. 3 were shot down by anti-aircraft fire, while 1 crashed into the flight deck of a carrier without killing anyone. It was only Yukio who succeeded in his mission. He struck a US carrier's bomb magazine, triggering its destruction and the deaths of 133 men. Astonishingly, we have a photo of the event. Here it is, the very first successful kamikaze attack. Now, the battle itself was a disaster for Japan. It suffered its greatest ever loss of ships and men in combat, effectively ending the existence of the Japanese Navy. And yet, in the shadow of defeat, the Japanese saw the promise of the successful kamikaze strikes as a blueprint for their resistance. The kamikaze program was expanded rapidly, with aircraft training periods shortened to just 30 days to allow for faster turnover. Supposedly, volunteers outnumbered available aircraft 2 to 1, with some pilots having already pre-composed their death poems, a lovely samurai tradition, before their training had even begun. To utilize the enthusiasm of its citizens, Japan built special kamikaze aircraft designed with minimal defenses and jettisonable landing gears. All in all, by the end of the war, nearly 4,000 kamikaze pilots would embark on their one-way missions, achieving a success rate of around 20%, which might not sound like a lot, but it was definitely much higher than the success rate of their regular air missions from before. Now, not all of those missions ended up with the pilot's death, of course. Sometimes bad weather, no targets, or even simple human fear could lead to a mission abort. For those survivors, however, their lives may as well have been over, for the Japanese were infamous in their social stigmatization of cowardice. There are many stories out there of survivors who were shunned by their families and communities. One particularly unfortunate pilot was supposedly shot after aborting his mission 9 times. So, as I said, there was no winning if you were a kamikaze pilot. And the only good to come out of this whole ordeal was the beautiful, if not somber, collection of poetry, which I've conveniently linked in the description below. There you will also find the link to download War Thunder, which you can play now for free. And for a limited time, you can claim all those delicious sign-up rewards as well. A big thank you to all of our wonderful patrons. We are forever in your debt. And, as always, stay tuned for the next poetically self-destructive episode of Side Quest. What did the kamikaze flight instructor tell his students? I'm only gonna show you this once.